Outside of only March and April of 2020, hiring in the US economy hasn't been this bad in 6.5 years. Now, when the government reports on job openings and labor turnover, the only number that anyone pays attention to is the first one, job openings. But it's not worth your time. The one you need to focus on and pay very close attention to, that's hires. And as I said, that just fell to the lowest in 6.5 years. The other somewhat useful information comes in the form of quits. But guess what? That one looks just as bad as hiring because American workers absolutely know this economy and the labor market are nothing like booming. Even some of the biggest companies in the world are saying their customers have reached their breaking point. The economy sucks and it is getting worse, not better. Meanwhile, all anyone cares about is what will come flying out of Jay Powell's mouth later today. Policymakers at the Fed will be mesmerized and fixated on consumer price estimates that have been triggered by factors that have nothing to do with the overall shape of the economy. We're talking supply and geopolitics in oil, seasonality in gasoline, and a major bump in insurance premiums that is only going to make the bad disinflationary situation even worse and even more disinflationary. No wonder people are confused. So let's start unconfusing everything. And we'll start with job openings and labor turnover. The government reported job openings, labor turnover, hires, quits, layoffs for the month of March 2024. It's 1 month further back from payrolls, which will come out on Friday. Job openings came in at 8.49 million, which is a new low. It's down pretty substantially from 8.81 million. And as I said, who cares? Job openings have overstated the demand for workers in the economy for many, many years. There's dummy postings, there's double counting, there's not enough control in the statistics and the data and everything else. So job openings are what you're going to hear in the media, and that's the one you should just set aside completely. Instead, hiring. The rate of hiring in March of 2024 was just 5.5 million. That's less than December of 2020, which was the worst month of 2020 outside the actual initial lockdowns. That's the lowest outright hiring rate since December of 2017. Hiring has absolutely tumbled, and this is why we keep hearing stories about how difficult the job market is, as I'll get into in just a moment. When you adjust it for population, because population continues to grow, the rate of hiring was just 2.05%. That's a percentage of the civilian non-institutional population, which is only just above March of 2020. That's how bad the rate of hiring was in March of 2024. And it's the lowest since October of 2016. And it's not just how low the rate of hiring is going and how much hiring is going on, but also the direction and how persistent it is in continuing to go lower and lower. As bad as hiring is right now, it continues to get worse. We keep talking about a hiring freeze because businesses are indeed not hiring workers. Maybe they're not firing workers, though that's in question too. But the first part of a recession, the big half of the recession, they're not hiring workers either. There is an economy-wide hiring freeze, and it's been ongoing for the last 6, 7, 8 months, and it is definitely contributing to the weakness across the entire U.S. landscape, and the rest of the world too, as we'll see also in a moment. That led to the quits number for March 24, back into JOLTS. That one came out as 3.33 million, which is down from 3.53 million last month, or in the month of February. And that's also the lowest of the cycle because American workers know that there are no jobs to go to. So they're no longer quitting in the same fashion they had been. Remember the Great Resignation? Yeah, that's a long distant memory. Workers know that if they lose their job or choose to leave their job, it is very tough going out there. And as I said, we get so many anecdotes and even mainstream stories about confusion over how the jobs number looks really good on paper, how the statistics come out like payrolls and suggest the jobs market is booming, labor, employment, everything is just terrific. Except when you actually talk to people, especially anyone who's been unfortunately laid off or someone who's looking for a job, it's an entirely different picture. I'll give you an example. This is from a couple months ago, actually early March, reported in USA Today. Cheyenne Barton, 26 of Kissimmee, Florida, graduated in December with 1 degree in biomedical sciences and another in computer technology and software development. The kind of practical background employers have coveted. She initially targeted software development jobs, but is now looking really for any job where she can use her degrees. Barton has applied for about 1,000 positions, but hasn't yet notched an interview. That's crazy. Companies, quote, say they want recent grads who are teachable and can learn quicker, she says. But then you apply for the job and it's like, oh, we already have over 100 applicants with people who are more qualified. And her story is hardly unique. In fact, this one news article had several stories in it that were of the same type. Not just new workers, but also experienced workers who rarely get an interview, let alone a second look or a successful job search, able to complete it and secure a job. And we've heard this in growing fashion, increasing fashion, all throughout the statistics. Not just these anecdotes, not just in the JOLTS numbers. Just in recent days, we talked about S&P Global. What did S&P Global say about the labor situation for their latest data? They said signs of demand weakness impacted hiring plans at companies in the U.S. at the start of the second quarter. A number of survey respondents indicated that they held off on backfilling positions following the departure of staff. As a result, employment decreased for the first time since June of 2020. The overall reduction in workforce numbers was centered on services, where employment decreased solidly and to the largest extent since mid-2020. The Dallas Fed Services Survey brought that up in yesterday's video. 2 straight declines in the employment index. Negatives in the employment index are exceptionally rare. Here we have 2 in a row that are accelerating downward, suggesting that this is not the usual for the last couple of years, weakness. Something is changing. Also, the conference board yesterday, really sharp decline in consumer confidence. And they said consumers became less positive about the current labor market situation and more concerned about future business conditions, job availability, and income. Because it seems like the only places that are actually hiring outside of maybe a state and federal government, some government agency, it's waiters and bartenders. You have to go to Starbucks in order to get a job. Except maybe no longer Starbucks. Earlier today, Starbucks came out with its earnings report that was pretty awful. And they said, yeah, we're not seeing a real robust economic environment. Our customers, consumers, are absolutely struggling. The CEO said, we face a challenging operating environment. Headwinds discussed last quarter have continued in a number of key markets. We continue to feel the impact of a more cautious consumer, particularly with our more occasional customer. And a deteriorating economic outlook has weighed on customer traffic and impact felt broadly across the industry. Deteriorating economic outlook for consumers who are not experiencing a robust labor market, who are not getting enough in wage and pay increases to offset cost increases that are coming about for non-economic reasons. Gasoline prices aren't up because demand is surging, just ask Starbucks or McDonald's. McDonald's said, it is clear that broad-based consumer pressures persist around the world. Consumers continue to be even more discriminating with every dollar that they spend as they face elevated price pressures in their day-to-day spending. This is not a booming economy, nor is this inflation. I know it sounds like inflation because that's what everybody says, but this is not an inflationary economy. This is an economy that is absolutely struggling, and we can feel it in so many different ways. It's not just that costs have gone up. If it was genuinely inflationary, there would be the offset in income. There would be more than enough income coming in to match consumer spending power, and then the ability of companies to pass along those price increases to their consumers, and that's just not happening. We've got price pressures that are up and weakness across the entire economy, weakness that is only getting worse. Another restaurant, because restaurants have been one of the few industries that have held up relatively well under all of this consumer pressure. Yum Brands, KFC, they just reported too, and that said, sales at restaurant chain owner Yum Brands fell for the first time since the depths of the pandemic in 2020. How many times we keep hearing this? For the first time since 2020. Providing more evidence that one of the most resilient parts of the consumer economy is weakening. Revenue declined 2.9% in the quarter through March, while analysts expected a gain. Same-store sales at KFC, the company's biggest chain, fell 2%, weighed down by spending weakness in the United States. In the U.S., weakness, consumers, jobs, hiring freeze. Layoffs may not be that far behind. This economy isn't booming. It absolutely sucks, and it is getting worse. And we can see this in so many different ways. But we also have to keep in mind that it is not just the U.S. In fact, I've been talking how long about how much worse it is outside the U.S. than inside the U.S. In fact, that's what we're really focused on here. What's really striking about all the recent developments is that weakness that we saw outside the U.S. is starting to filter its way inside, globally synchronized. The U.S. is beginning to more and more synchronize with everyone else, which is not a good direction to be pulled in. Even Starbucks said that. Go back to Starbucks. Starbucks, at least what Bloomberg reported from Starbucks, the company reported a 4% decline in same-store sales in the last quarter, while analysts expected growth. In China, same-store sales fell 11%. The pullback by consumers was widespread, with the overall number of transactions sinking 6% and retreating in each of the company's geographic segments. Globally synchronized. And for a while, it looked as though consumer spending was going to make sure that the U.S. decoupled from the rest of the world. But now consumers are buckling, in large part because companies are experiencing a weak environment and are having to take substantial steps to control their own costs, which has led to a prolonged hiring freeze already, which has only made the consumer situation even worse. And we're getting locked into that vicious cycle, the vicious recession cycle that obliterates any idea of decoupling in the US and brings us back to, or back closer toward, globally synchronized. As I said, all anyone will care about is what Jay Powell says later today. I'm recording this before the FOMC announcement comes out and then his press conference, and everybody will be fixated on every single word. Will the Fed delay rate cuts? Will they get rid of them entirely? Are they going to be talking about rate hikes? Because for the Federal Reserve, none of this weakness actually matters at the moment. Well, it might have in cycles past like 2019, which would have already led to rate cuts. Because of the last couple years, because of the degree of supply shock imbalance leading to massive amounts of consumer price increases that were not inflation, the Fed has to focus on CPIs because it does not know or understand where consumer prices actually come from. So it's always going to be a slave to the last CPI report or deflator. And if they're high for reasons that have nothing to do with the shape of the economy, they're going to focus on that consumer price number anyway, even if there's no reason to do so. So they're going to focus on price pressures or their perception of price pressures rather than this gathering weakness. I'll give you one more example from data we got today. ISM manufacturing. After being above 50 in the month of March and everybody celebrating a manufacturing renaissance, well, right back below 50 again. The headline was at 49.2. New orders are contracting. All the same familiar economic weakness that we associate with the manufacturing sector. That was all there in the ISM. Employment still under 50, though it was a little bit less under 50 this month. However, prices jumped. The prices index went to 60.9 from 55.8. So if you're Jay Powell and the rest of the FOMC, which part of the ISM are you going to focus on? You're going to focus on the 60.9 in the price number rather than the 49.2 headline or the 49.1 for new orders. You're going to overlook the weakness that we see in all of these anecdotes and stories about the labor market being incredibly difficult because the last CPI was too sticky and the price deflator from GDP had too much insurance costs in it. It's not about the economics. It's about specific numbers and not understanding where those numbers come from. So while the Federal Reserve can be hawkish all they want, the economy is nothing like the CPI or the GDP deflator or the PC deflator. It is really moving in the wrong direction. The US did not decouple from the rest of the world. The economy is not good and it is getting worse. The JOLTS data today, especially the low hiring rate, confirms that what we've been suspecting, what we've been hearing, what we've been seeing all across the economy, and that is major hiring freeze that is getting worse, not better. Companies are taking very concrete steps to control their costs. Maybe they're starting to lay off workers, but at the very least, they're not hiring anyone. And that just adds to the misery of the current situation because consumers are being impacted still by non-economic price increases. Insurance was one, gasoline is another, energy costs more broadly, some food prices too, though many of those have calmed down, but it makes it incredibly difficult when you can't go looking for a better job because no one is hiring. Plus, you're now more concerned about your current situation, wondering if maybe your company that's under pressure is going to start laying off workers too. It leads to a very toxic mix for the entire economy. So we see that in a number of ways. We've got anecdotes, we've got data to back it up, we've got widespread confirmation from companies saying their customers have bucked, they've broken down. Yet the Federal Reserve is going to focus on prices. They're going to take rate cuts off the table, or maybe talk about taking rate cuts off the table, only to put them back on the table just a couple months from now. Because in the end, the Fed is going to flip-flop because that's what the Fed does. The Fed follows the economy, or what they think the economy is doing, the latest CPI number, rather than leading into confidently proclaiming and forecasting where they think everything is going to go. They're looking backwards at the last CPI, thinking that's the economy, when they should be looking at all this other stuff and saying, and realizing it's completely different. The economy sucks and it is getting worse. Globally synchronized after all. Honestly, the only things that have been holding the U.S. economy together are labor hoarding and government transfers. As we get more signs that labor hoarding may be coming to an end, we've got to focus and spotlight on government transfers. That's the video link below. As always, thank you very much for joining me. Huge thank you, Eurodollar University members and subscribers. And until next time, take care.